How's that? Oh, wow, there it is. Good morning, everyone. Actually, I'm glad to see everybody here. Usually, when we turn the clock ahead an hour, everybody goes, "Oh my God, it's really only 9 o'clock," and I want to. Well, anyway, I'm glad you're all here. As you all know, my name is Don Campbell, and I'm one of your two enrichment lecturers. I do the land, and Russell does the sea. So it kind of works out pretty well because we have a lot of land time and we have a lot of sea time. Today I'm going to talk about India. More specifically, I'm going to talk about Indian culture, and I don't want to proselytize or upset anybody. I do talk about some things that are somewhat controversial because I'm going to talk about the religion and the local culture in India. Why? Because the first time my wife Susie and I went there, it was kind of a mind stopper. You go, oh my God, what is all this stuff? There's so much there that it really does overwhelm you a little bit. So I want people to feel a little more comfortable when you're out and about in India and understand a little bit about what you see. Now the other thing is, what I'd like to do, as you know, I offer Big O points as a part of my talks. Today, I'm going to actually offer a bonus Big O point for this afternoon, right after tea. Anybody that can get into that position and get out of it without help, staying there for, maybe 10 or 12 hours. No. If you can just get in and out of that position, you are very limber and in very good shape. Anyway, we're going to keep in mind the ethnicities of this country, and I hope these talks will give you a little deeper understanding and a better perspective of what we're going to see. As I said, we're going to talk about India's culture, the religions, the castes, the dress, the food, and even sport. And they all combine to make this country, which is a really, really large and unique country, a very interesting place. And in my next presentation, which I believe is tomorrow, I don't know if it's morning or afternoon, you have to check currents on that, will it be about more the political side. It'll be about the history of the sultans, the rajas, and even the Taj Mahal. How many people are going out to the Taj? Oh, beautiful. How many people have been there? All right. As those of you who haven't been there, you'll find it's going to be a real treat. So I think you'll enjoy that trip. All right, let's get started. First, the answer to the last Big O question. What's the name of the acrobatic animal that lives in the sea off the coast of Oman? Spinner dolphins, right. And you know the thing that's weird? It took almost 2 days to get rid of the last points because I think people all said, well, somebody's already answered that. You don't have to say that. You can come right out and say, all right, I've got the answer. I'm going to tell you. And you can do that in a dining room. You can do it in a terrace. You can do it in a hallway, martinis, horizons, anywhere but the loo. Okay? And any time until the answer is gone, it's still up for grabs. All right, let's get going here. Now, Mumbai was originally built on 7 islands, and they were separated by swampland. And then over about 5 centuries, the people there reclaimed the area and made it all one great big chunk of land. Mumbai's name itself comes from a local goddess, Mumba. That's her. She was the consort of the Hindu Lord Shiva, and Shiva is honored out on Elephanta Island. Now today, the largest island that remains in that bay area is Elephanta. It's located about 7 miles from Mumbai, and you can get there by ferry. Now, Elephanta is famous for these 8th and 9th century cave temples that were carved out of solid rock. They were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site to preserve the work. The island was named for a really huge stone elephant that was found here by the Portuguese way back in the early 1500s. That giant statue was cut into pieces, taken into Mumbai, and reassembled. And if you want to go see the statue itself today, you don't have to go out to the island. You just have to go to the Victoria Garden Zoo. That's in the city, by the way. Now, Elephanta Cave is said to have been the home of the Hindu Lord Shiva. He's often shown in deep meditation with his wife and children. That's what you see here is one of the carvings that depicts that. He's one of a trinity of divine characters who are usually depicted in their methodology, their mythology, and their religion as slaying dragons. Now, Lord Shiva is also symbolized as a lingam. Lingam is the male figure of creative energy, or the phallus. And I don't want to get anybody upset by this, but that's what it is. And most Hindus view the linga as a symbol of divine energy. The lingam and the yoni have been interpreted as the male and female sex organs since the end of the 19th century. Now, if you visit Elephanta Island, when you get across there by the ferry, there's a train, a little choo-choo train that will take you up to the base of the hill. So usually crowded. A lot of people prefer to walk because the train is so crowded. When you get to the bottom of the hill, there's this long stairway of about 120 or so steps that goes up. They're not all even. Some are high, some are low, some are wide, some are narrow, and you can get up there. But they have these monkeys all along the path. They're very aggressive, and they will steal anything that you have if they can get their hands around it. That's things like watches, jewelry, cameras, backpacks, whatever. If you're not really holding on to it tight, these monkeys will keep it for a souvenir. Now, my quickie trip tip for this particular place, if you don't want to try the big climb, is take the sedan chairs. This is kind of neat. These guys put you in a chair. It's not the most sturdy or safe-looking way to get up the hill, and then they put you up on their shoulders, and they carry you up the hill. To me, that's scarier than it was trying to think about walking up the hill, but a lot of people do take the sedan chairs. Now, you can also, if you take the sedan chair up, you don't have to take the sedan chair coming back down. You can walk back down because gravity will help you a lot. And there are vendors along the entire way. There are people that will sell things to you the entire way, up and down. So please, if you want to do any shopping over there, make sure you take some small change. If you hand them a $20 bill, they'll look at you like, what is this? So take some small change with you. Elephanta cave temples were carved during an era that was originally called the Vedic period. Now, the Veda is a Sanskrit term that means knowledge. Veda are the sacred scriptures of the Hindu, and it's a religion that began way back in that period. And the term Hindu originally came from a river complex in northwest India. Today, about 80% of the Indian population regard themselves as Hindu, and there are over 900 million Hindu followers worldwide. The culture of India follows its history and its religions, and we'll explore some of those major religions as we continue. Now, it's hard to define Hinduism because of its many practices and beliefs. And in some ways, you can almost think of it like Protestant churches in the West, where you've got so many different versions of Protestant churches, all with the same basic tenets. Now, most Hindus believe in a supreme God, but the God's form and the qualities are represented by many different deities. Now, Hindus believe that souls pass through cycles of successive lives. Your next incarnation depends on how your previous life was lived. So if you were a worm, you might come back as a worm. I mean, a human worm, okay? So you might come back as something that you didn't really want to be. Now, their faith is based on the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and that's all governed by a thing called karma. Now, karma means you get rewarded for good behavior in your current life and punished for bad behavior. In other words, you're going to get out of life what you put into it. Now, the Hindu scriptures, or the Veda, talk about dharma as a sort of a code of conduct, a law or a duty for good behavior. They kind of lay down the rules of life. Now, you may see cows. Actually, if you don't see cows, you're not in India. Now, you may see cows roaming the streets in India, and that's true in Mumbai, less in Mumbai because it's such a big city, but they are there. But in the towns outside of India, they'll be all over the place. Now, the cattle are considered sacred in several different religions, but here most notably among the Hindu and the Jains. Now, they're also a symbol of the Hindu Dharma. The Hindus worship cows because they were the pets of Lord Krishna. Bulls and cows are given very special protection, and the Hindu scriptures prohibit the consumption of anything related to beef. Bovine milk actually holds a key to a lot of their religious rituals, and it's customary to boil milk on the stove or even lead a cow through your house at a housewarming ceremony. I'm not sure I'd want to do that with my new home in California. It might be a little bit tough. But anyway, it's considered also very good luck in India to give a cow a snack or some fruit for breakfast. Cattle being sacred to the Hindus is really not a new concept. That actually first showed up in ancient religions in Egypt and Greece as well as in Rome. So worshiping cows has been around for a long time. Now, some people touch the back of a cow or even will kiss them on the rear end. And I know what I want to be when I come back in my next life. A Hindu cow. Now, many Hindus who are vegetarians will not even use any kind of leather. In a religiously diverse country such as India and also Pakistan and some of the others in the area, leather vendors have to be very careful to label the kinds of leather that are used in their products. In some buildings, you may not even be able to enter if you're wearing a bovine leather belt or carrying a leather purse. Now, the various beliefs increase the demand for neutral leathers, okay, such as ostrich or deer, or even the famous little Naugahyde guy, you know, the little guy they make our car seats out of. Anyway, in that way, a Hindu can avoid cow leather, a Muslim cannot accidentally purchase pigskin leather, and so on. And there are many signs of India's religions that you may see on your journey similar to these, where they will tell you different things that kind of fit into the subculture. Now, you most likely will see bindis of some sort on Indian women. Traditionally, the area between the eyebrows is said to be the sixth chakra. It's the seat of concealed wisdom, or the third eye. Usually it's just a red dot, but it can also be other colors, and it also could be a piece of jewelry. Red represents honor, love, and prosperity. Now, it's interestingly, the Islamic Research Foundation has said that wearing a bindi is a sign of a Hindu woman. That's kind of to set aside the Muslim women from the Hindus. In modern times, the bindi, though, is worn by people of almost any religion. I mean, people wear them all over the world. And now it's more considered a sign of beauty rather than a religious symbol. Now, you can even go out if you want to and buy small packets of bindis just about anywhere in India. And as my wife will tell you, they do make great souvenirs. And they're kind of fun to have around. You know, you stick one on your head and let your neighbors wonder what you're up to. Now, you may see women with pierced noses in India, but most likely you'll see them like this at weddings. Now, piercings were regarded as a mark of beauty and social standing, as well as a Hindu honor to the goddess of marriage. The piercing on the outside of the left nostril, specifically the left nostril, is preferred because it supposedly makes childbirth easier. Now, maybe that's why the women have to do it and the men never have their ears pierced or noses pierced on the left side. Anyway, another tradition follows that a woman will still have her nose rings to pay for her funeral if she has had all her other gold taken from her. Why? Because nose rings and studs cannot be easily removed. At least they can't be removed without you knowing about it. The caste system in India is such a big part of its culture and religion that it still goes on today. And while a classification of people has been identified with Hinduism in the past, today it's been carried over into Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and even Sikhism. Now, Varna is the term for the four castes that are traditional in Hindu society. And they start out with the highest level. The first caste, if you will, is the Brahmin, and those are the priests and scholars. And then the next level down are the kings, the governors, the warriors, soldiers, judges, and so on. Then the third caste are the cattle herders, agriculturists, artisans, and merchants. And the fourth caste are the laborers and the service providers. Now, there are some groups, particularly people that have nothing to do with any of the above, that are known as the untouchables, and they are actually excluded from the Varna system of castes. Those are the untouchables, generally unskilled people with no future and no jobs at all. Now, the Dhobi Ghat is an open, I guess you'd call it a laundromat. It's in Mumbai. They have these in other cities too, but the most famous is in Mumbai. And the washers locally are known as dhobis. And that's an example of a Hindu caste of people where the people are born into their jobs. Now, Dhobi Ghat has rows of open-air concrete wash pens. You can see them there. There's little rectangular sort of things. And they are each fitted with their own flogging stones. Each pen rents for about $8 a month. And in India terms, that's quite a bit of money. They're filled with water and detergent. And the laundry soaks in those pens for about 8 or 9 hours. Then the Dhobis begin to just scrub and beat them against the stones. They do that continuously, slap, slap, slap. And the clothes are then hung out or laid in the sun to dry. They launder the clothes from hotels, hospitals, and even from individuals every day, 7 days a week from sunrise until early evening. And that's been going on in the same location for about 140 years. None of the Dhobis are quite that old, however. Now, it is amazing now how white these things can get. I mean, you see this and it just blows your mind when you notice how dirty everything around it appears to be, but everything just is sparkling white. Most of the Dhobis live on the grounds in small one-room but illegal shacks. Sometimes their hands get so dry from the washing chemicals and detergents that they actually start to crack and bleed. Now, the Supreme Court of India, back in 2007, said that social organization based on caste is inherited and cannot be changed. Well, of course, they were all judges, so they were up in the second caste, so that made sense to them. Now, discrimination against the lower castes is illegal in India under its constitution, but caste-related discrimination and violence continues to be reported across the country. Now, while the Hindu caste system is slowly changing in urban areas in India, most of the people still continue to marry strictly within their own caste. Marriage is believed to be for life, and the vast majority of the weddings are arranged by their parents or other family members. Now, if you happen to venture just outside of Mumbai, you may see places like this. They are huge outdoor concert-like venues with very bright lights and lavish decorations. These are the sites that cater to Indian weddings. Those are spectacular events that just cost huge sums of money. They usually involve the entire extended family and friends for both the bride and the groom. Now, the legal age of marriage in India is 18, but child marriages are still more common out in the rural areas. Another thing that's a little bit unusual, although it is changing slightly, is that divorce and remarriage in India are quite rare. By the year 700 in the Common Era, Muslim armies from Arabia invaded India. Now today the Hindus in India still don't want the Muslims around. You'll notice there's a little animosity, but religious tolerance here is a way of life. And now India is home to the second largest Muslim population in the world. Now, Muslims is the term that's used to describe the people from the religion of Islam. Now, Islam is a major world religion with over 1 billion followers. That's about a fifth of the world's population. It's a monotheistic, meaning that it looks and says there is only a single God. The Muslims descended from Abraham, and they believe in the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. All of those teachings are in the Quran, and that's their sacred scripture. And the Muslims, surprisingly, venerate Mary as the mother of Christ, who they believe was a holy prophet. Islam, peace, nanu, whatever. Anyway, Islam comes from the Arabic root word meaning peace. The same Arabic root word gives us salam alaikum, peace be with you. Now, the blessing is often used in Jewish, and the similar blessing is used in Jewish and Christian services, and as well as in intergalactic movies and TV shows. Now, Muslims celebrate Ramadan by fasting, and the word Ramadan comes from an Arabic root which means scorching heat or dryness. While fasting from dawn until sunset during the period of month of Ramadan, Muslims refrain from consuming food, drinking liquids, smoking, and engaging in sexual relations. Some Muslims also refrain from other behavior that would be considered or perceived as sinful, such as swearing, disagreements, backbiting, or even procrastination. I think I'll hold off on that one. Another thing you may see in India are older men with orange hair or beards. Especially you'll see this out in the country, outside of the big cities. Now, some of the Muslim men use henna as a dye for their hair and their beards, and most particularly like this guy. Oh, I wanted to rub my beard and I hit the wrong thing. Now, they use henna because it is a very inexpensive dye and very locally available. And dyeing one's hair is called sunnah. Now, sunnah is the way of life that was prescribed on the basis of the teachings of Muhammad. Muhammad himself is not believed to have ever said it, but he supposedly encouraged Muslim women to dye their nails and their hands with henna to demonstrate their femininity. Now, today there is some controversy over whether Muhammad said that or didn't say that, and so even in Islam there's a big discussion going on about that. Now, most Muslims no longer dye anything on their bodies, but they do the hair. They sometimes, on very special occasions, they will also put it on their bodies. Now, this is a photograph of a couple that is both Muslim and Jewish. Now, many Jews and Muslims have joined together in this very Hindu-dominated country. Judaism was among the first non-local religions to arrive in India, and the Jewish communities here have been free of discrimination from the very beginning, at least local discrimination. A major factor in the religious tolerance may be that the Hindus themselves do not try to convert anybody from any other religion into Hinduism. Now, the first Jews to arrive in India settled in Kochi, and they were called the Black Jews. Some believe that they came to India during the time of King Solomon. Now, a second wave was called the White Jews, and they arrived later actually quite a bit later, from Western Europe. They probably were trying to get away from the Spanish Inquisition. In 1524, a Jewish colony in Kochi was attacked by the Moors. Everybody seems to have used them kind of as a target. The Moors were Muslims from Africa, and they attacked because they felt that the Jews were interfering with their pepper trade. Remember, back in the 1500s, the whole spice trade back here was a really big thing. And pepper was one of the main things that the Moors wanted to control. Now, the synagogue in Kochi is the oldest and what used to be the British Commonwealth of Nations, and it was built back in 1568. It's also known by the name of the Paradesi, or Foreigner Synagogue. In keeping with Hindu and Islamic traditions, the local traditions, everyone who goes into this synagogue must be barefoot. So it's a little different than most of the synagogues in the rest of the world. In fact, probably all the other synagogues. The Jews in Kochi established a community that lasted for centuries, and the Hindus had granted them land in what today is known as Jewtown. Now, when Portugal occupied Kochi, they persecuted the Jews because they brought with them the influence of the Spanish Inquisition. And that went on until the more tolerant Dutch arrived in the late 1600s. The Jews prospered in India from then on through I guess the whole time, even when Britain was in control. And historical Jewish sites in Kochi are an excellent window into the history of the region. Now, this is a photograph from back in 1900, and no, I did not take this one. It's of a group called the Baghdadi Jews, and they settled in Mumbai in the 1800s after coming to India to escape religious persecution in the area we know of today as Iraq. They were also interested in the commercial opportunities that were being offered in Mumbai. Now, the Jews found it very easy to move between the East and the West, and they became successful traders and bankers. The Baghdadi Jews traced their roots back to oil pressers in Iraq, and they refrained from work on the Sabbath. They practiced circumcision. They followed the Orthodox dietary laws. They kept their distinct culture, but they used the Arabic language. Later, English became their preferred language, and the Baghdadi Jews started to adopt into Western style of clothing. Now, here is a naming ceremony at the Jewish synagogue in Mumbai, and at its peak in the late 1940s, the Jewish population in Mumbai reached nearly 30,000 people. Today, about a fourth of India's Jewish population lives in the city of Mumbai, but it has declined and it's only now about 5,000. In 2008, a terrorist attack on the Mumbai killed six of the Jews at the Jewish Outreach Center. Now that said, these were terrorists and they weren't associated with the normal Muslim community, and the Jewish and Muslim communities in the city remain very strong and have a very good relationship ever since the attacks. Now the Zoroastrians live in India and they are called Parsis. Now Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest religions in the world. It is one of the first monotheistic religion, and it dates back to about 1200 BCE. Now there was a priest named Zoroaster who was born in Iran at the time when the Stone Age was just moving into the Bronze Age in Iran. Now the people believed at the time, all the people believed in a polytheistic or a multi-god kind of religion. And the early Iranians practiced rituals which necessitated the sacrifice of animals and the use of a hallucinogenic plant. Wonder what that could have been. Probably has little fine leaves and you dry it up and, well, anyway. Zoroaster condemned those practices. He thought it was wrong, and he persuaded the people to shift their allegiance to a new faith that he put forward. Zoroastrians are not fire worshippers, as is generally believed in a lot of places, but the fire is an important symbol in their faith as it represents the divine light of their god, Ahura Mazda. Now, when Zoroastrians pray, they pray in the direction of a fire or a light. Now, Zoroastrians are not very ritualistic, but they're more concerned with the ethics of good words, good thoughts, good deeds. Now, to represent these, a Zoroastrian will wear a cord around him called a kusti, and it's been tied 3 times to represent each of those ethical parts. Now, Zoroastrians are careful not to pollute nor destroy rivers or trees. And because of that, they're often called the very first ecological religion. Now, to preclude the pollution of the earth, the bodies of the dead are placed on top of a tower and exposed to the sun and birds. Now, we became aware of all of this when we were in India a few years ago because the guide pointed to this tall building and said, "See that?" And you could see vultures swarming all around above it. It was the Tower of Silence that's used to expose the dead to scavenging birds. Now, Zoroastrian tradition considers a dead body, in addition to things like cut hair and your trimmings from your nails, to be unclean. The corpse demon, I didn't know I had a corpse demon, but anyway, the corpse demon is believed to rush into the body when it died and contaminate everything it comes into contact with. Now, some influential and notable Parisis are, for example, orchestra conductor Zubin Mehta and the late Freddie Mercury from the rock band Queen. So it is a fairly well-known religion worldwide. While Jainism is a minority religion in India, it does have about 4 million followers. Now, Jain clothing is pretty simple. It's just a sheet that's literally wrapped around the body in a pretty seemingly haphazard way. It covers the mouth, and that's to remind them not to speak in an evil manner. Jains consider harsh words to be a form of violence, and Jainism calls for nonviolence toward all living things. They believe that nonviolence and self-control is how they will be relieved or freed from the cycle of reincarnation. Lacto-vegetarianism is mandatory for Jain followers. They don't eat root vegetables such as potatoes, onions, roots, or tubers. Why? Because little tiny life forms or even worms might be harmed when the plants are harvested. Food that contains even the smallest particle of an animal or egg is absolutely forbidden. Now, Jain followers abstain from farming because it might mean killing or injuring small animals, worms, or insects. They believe milk and dairy products involve violence toward cows. Honey is outlawed because they believe it harms the bees to take the honey from the hive. Now, this Jain temple in Mumbai, and it's one I think that's on one of the excursions, was built back in 1904. A very interesting place to visit. Now, I will tell you from experience, it's right next to a police station. So if you go there and you have a driver that you've hired for the day, be real careful where he parks, because he might end up being incarcerated for parking badly. If you want to talk about that, we can do that after we get done here. But anyway, when you enter the temple, you must remove your shoes. And compared with most Jain temples, this is a very large one with very ornate sculptures and paintings. There are small chapels all around the inside and outside of the temple, and each has different objects of worship. One, for example, was simply a rock. And there were women who were putting grains of rice and making a symbol that looked like the reverse version of a swastika. The 4 arms in that pattern stand for the 4 destinies: demons, animals, humans, and angels. And it represents the uninterrupted nature of the universe in the cycle of reincarnation. Now, the Jains have the highest literacy rate of any religious community in India. Their library of manuscripts is the oldest in the country. And just for information, there are also Jain communities in Belgium, the United States, Hong Kong, Japan, and Singapore. Now, Buddhism is based on Siddhartha's enlightenment through meditation. It arose in and around an ancient kingdom in India. Now, Buddhism has been re-emerging in India for about the past century, and that's attributed to adoption by many intellectuals in the country, the migration of people from Tibet, mostly Tibetan exiles, and the mass conversion of hundreds of thousands of Hindus. Now, Buddhism is divided into a number of different traditions that share a common set of beliefs. One is rebirth. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean return to earth is exactly the same entity ever again as in reincarnation. Instead, rebirth is kind of like a leaf on a tree. That leaf drops in the fall and dies and goes away and it withers. Okay, a new leaf eventually will crop up somewhere in the tree that kind of replaces the first one. It's similar to the one that fell off earlier, but it's not identical. Now, after many such cycles, if a person releases their attachment to desire and self, they could achieve what's called nirvana. That's a state of liberation that includes freedom from suffering. One of the main tenets of Buddhism is the principle of reciprocity. That is the same as the golden rule in Christianity. Do unto others as you would wish them to do to you. This principle is found in most all major religions around the world. Now, this is the Santa Cruz Cathedral, and it's one of the 8 Roman Catholic basilicas in India. It's the mother church of the Kochi Diocese. It's the second oldest in the country. Today, Christianity is India's 3rd largest religion with about 24 million followers. It was introduced to India by the Apostle Thomas, but it wasn't really well established until into the 6th century. Actually, the history of Catholic missionaries in India starts with the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama. He was seeking a form of anti-Islam alliances with pre-existing Christian nations. Now, on the second of the Portuguese expeditions, a fleet consisting of 13 ships and 18 priests were led by Pedro Alvarez Cabral, who anchored in Cochin in 1500. The Raja of Cochin allowed the priests to do apostolic work. We're going to talk about the Rajas and the Sultans further in my next presentation. Now, shown here is the Say Cathedral in Goa, and it's one of the largest in Asia. The architectural style is an amalgamation of kind of Gothic elements as well as some Portuguese style. It was built to commemorate the victory of the Portuguese over a Muslim army back in the early 1500s, and that actually led to the capture of the city of Goa. Now, since the 19th century, Protestant churches have been present in India, and they were spread by the efforts of both British and American missionaries. Now, this is kind of interesting because the Indian government decided they wanted to support the baptized Christians by giving them rice donations. Those people were dubbed rice Christians. Now, it's kind of considered in India as a negative term, and it was used to describe someone who declared himself to be a Christian only for the material benefits rather than for religious reasons. They only converted to Christianity in order to receive the rice and the charity or for other material achievement. Many of those people very early on were forced converts who came over because of the Spanish Inquisition that also affected a lot of what was going on in India. Now, another part of Indian culture is the dress, mostly for the women. The men's dress is pretty similar to what we in the West are used to, but shown here are typical Indian saris. The clothing varies widely in style and color across India, depending on the region, the religion, the climate, and so on. Tailored European-style clothes are starting to become more fashionable in urban areas, but the most popular outfit for women, no matter where you are in India, is the sari. It's very comfortable, and women like to wear them because they hide a multitude of flaws. You got that one. Anyway, you can have a sari made in just a few hours because only the blouse needs to be tailored. The rest of the sari is some 4 to 9 yards of material that's arranged over the body in various ways. Now, Susie's quick trip tip here is to buy the pre-cut material at a department store. It's pretty inexpensive, and then you take it to a local shop for a tailor to make the blouse to your arrangements. Lady, this is for you, not for your husbands. It's very inexpensive, and it's a faster way, and it can be done in just a couple hours, and that's her after she had hers done when we were here a couple years ago. Now, how about something to eat? Food is always important. It's a part of the culture here, and it should be tried to round out anyone's visit. Now, the national dish is biryani, or chicken and rice. Sometimes you can make it with beef or mutton or egg, but the most common here is chicken. Now, my quickie trip tip here is no one eats cold food in India, so you shouldn't try cold food. Warm dishes are normal, and visitors should always choose hot cooked food. This is true on the streets as well as in the restaurants. Puttu is a steam cake that's prepared from rice flour, and it's steamed in a long hollow bamboo or a metal cylinder. Now, I mention this because you can find these in neat little rolls to be purchased while you're out and about. They sell them in shops. They sell them on the streets. They usually eat them at breakfast with fried pompadons. Those are little crisp Italian breads that are kind of like potato chips without the salt. Now, puttu is served with things like steamed bananas and sugar, or sometimes with a spicy curry that's made from chickpeas. Now, for the vegetarians among you, there is a traditional panu platter, and that's usually served on things like plantain leaves, and it includes rice and curries and vegetables, pickles, and yogurt. The locals use a lot of coconut and coconut oil in their cooking, and you'll see that every place you go. Now, there are marvelous Indian curries, even with a dish that originated in Southeast Asia. Curry didn't start here, it came from further east. Now, the common feature is the incorporation of a complex series of spices and herbs. The main spices that are found in almost all the curry powders that are used are turmeric, coriander, and cumin. Now, a curry mixture usually includes things like fresh or dried hot chilies, and you can ramp that up to as hot as you can tolerate. And traditionally, spices are used both whole and ground. Sometimes they're cooked, sometimes they're raw, and they are added at different times during the cooking process to produce very different results. Curries also that are known as vindaloo have become well known in Great Britain, America, and elsewhere in the world. Now, the name vindaloo derives from the Portuguese for wine and garlic, and the dish was originally made with pork. That wasn't taboo to the Christian Portuguese. Now, the inclusion of potatoes was later an Indian addition because the Indians were confused with the Hindu word for potato, which is aloo, so they thought it was potatoes and wine. Now, curries could be either wet or dry. A wet curry contains a significant amount of sauce or gravy. They're usually based on yogurt or coconut milk, a legume puree that's called dal, or even just stock. And dry curries are cooked with very, very little liquid, which is then allowed to evaporate and leaves other ingredients coated with a fairly thick spice mixture. Now, my advice, if you eat in a restaurant in India, give it all a try. Try as many different dishes as you can get. It's all excellent food. Now, if you find it too spicy, if you find a specific dish too spicy, just ask for some coconut milk and you can tone it down with that. That works quite well. Okay, now, what is a culture without its sport? Cricket is undoubtedly the most popular sport in India. This is like their Super Bowl, World Series, Final Four, NCAA, NFL, everybody's championships rolled into one. This is really a big deal. Now, everybody here understand cricket? All right, let me kind of do this. This is how it's described to someone that's not specifically familiar with the sport. You have two sides. One is out and one is in. Out in the field and in from the field. Each man that's on the side that's in goes out. And when he's out, he comes in, and the next man goes in until he's out. When they're all out, that side goes out, and the other side comes in, and the side that's been out tries to get those that are coming in out. Sometimes you get men that are still in and not out. When a man goes out to go in, and the men who are out try to get him out, and then he goes out, goes in, and the next man goes in, goes out. Wait, I'm not done. Now, there are also two men that are called umpires, and they stay out all the time, and they decide when the men who are out are in, or who are in or out. Now, when both sides have been in, and all the men that have gone out, and both sides have been out twice, and all the men have been in, including those who are not out, the game is over. Now you understand cricket. Now, I will tell you, these games might take days. A real cricket game. They have an abbreviated version today, but real cricket could take days. So we won't even be in India long enough for you to go to one game because we're going to change ports, unfortunately. It is a very interesting game, and it's also a game that's kind of addictive when you watch it. I mean, if you're into sitting for very, very long periods of time. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this kind of brief look at Italian. Boy, I'm into Italy. Why did we get there? Into Indian culture. I'd like you to join me at the next presentation, and it'll be in the currents. It's tomorrow sometime, I think, and it'll be on the history. It'll talk about the Rajas, the Sultan, and a beautiful story of the Taj Mahal. Now, as you know, I offer big O opportunities, and for my part, I ask a question at the end of the presentation. And the answer is in this lecture, and it'll repeat on your stateroom. And I was informed that even though they did run it for a while on Channel 28, it'll run on Channel 27, and I think they'll be in tandem with Russ's oceanographic one from later today. Anyway, be the first to find me after 5 p.m. tonight. Somewhere on the ship, between a pointy end and a blunt end, between a wet end and a dry end, with the correct answer, be the first one, and I'll give you a big O point. And also remember, if you can get in and out of that position unassisted, I'll give you another big O point. Anyway, here's the question, and this is easy. You'll get this one right away. What members of what religion won't harm a fly? Now, I'll take your questions out in baristas out by the grand dining room because they want to set up here for the next talk. Thank you very much. Have a great remains of the day.